More than 110 countries are experimenting in different stages of pilots of CBDCs around the world. But almost all countries are running some kind of experiment. They're all supposed to implement that probably by 2030 in alignment with the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations, because one of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations is around digitization. Christine Lagarde, the head of the ECB, has recently announced that in October 2025, they're going to launch the digital euro, which is the CBDC of Europe, if they manage to get approval from the relevant stakeholders, which is everyone except for the citizens of the EU. In Europe, they have done a survey for 19,000 Europeans across 11 Eurozone countries. And in that survey, they found that most of the public in the EU is actually not interested in the digital euro. Europeans have a strong preference for existing payment methods and see no need or no real benefit in a new type of payment system. She said, "We are setting up what's called the Savings and Investments Union, and it aims to redirect 10 trillion euros in private savings to fund military expansion."
It reminds me of actually during COVID, and the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada made a few different statements about trying to figure out a way to unlock people's savings as a method to drive the economy forward or access people's savings. It's like,
Dude, what the flip?
The world of international remittances and central banking is evolving, and this week we are talking in detail about a critical piece of this technological future state infrastructure, central bank digital currencies, with our special guest, journalist and podcaster Efrat Fenigson. I'm Scott Dietels. I'm the CEO and founder of Block Rewards, and part of our mission in bringing Bitcoin to the workplace is helping people understand how it will help them. The global rollout of central bank digital currencies will dramatically change the way all of us interact with money, and it is something that most people really do not understand well enough today. Efrat is an expert on the subject and provides a lot of color and detail around the developments happening all around the world. I hope you enjoy. All right, welcome to another episode of the Block Reward podcast. This week, we are talking about the evolution of banking and money, central bank digital currencies, with our very special guest, Efrat Fenigson. Efrat, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Maybe for the benefit of our guests, before we get started, if you could just give us a little bit of your background, tell us a little bit about your history and how you ended up here talking about Bitcoin around the world. And for our listeners, we met recently in person at Bitcoin Live in Sydney, Australia. It's tons of fun, and this is something you do as part of your life now?
Yeah, it's as part of my new life. That's what I do. So yeah, in my old life, for about 20-something years, I was in tech and marketing, always in the intersection of tech and marketing. My bachelor's degree was in computer science. I was a geek computer nerd programmer for a few years. I used to write video games, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, things like that, just for a few years until I realized that I can't go on doing that, because as much as I love technology, I don't like creating it. I like talking about it. I like being in the conversation, creating the conversation, but not creating the technology. There are other people that are so passionate about that more than me, and they do it so much better. So I was looking for a way to transition myself into technology, but the other side, the business side. And I had no intention to go back to university to do another degree. I felt like it was a waste of time. So I opened my own business, and I had a small business for a couple of years. It was jewelry and accessories. It didn't matter what it was. I just wanted to learn about running a business and sales and marketing and, purchasing, HR, finances, everything I needed to learn through experience. That's how I learned the best. So I did that for a couple of years when I was living in Australia, in Melbourne. That's why, when we met there, it was kind of a closed loop for me. And when I came back to Israel in 2007, I started working in tech again, but again, in business development, then marketing. And I continued in marketing for years and years. I was chief marketing officer for global companies, startups. I did very different types of industries. So I was in video and security of video and TV. And then I was doing autonomous drones. Then I moved on to commercial real estate, and I did some consulting for some medical and healthcare type of startups. So I had experiences in different types of industries. And when I decided to leave my career in corporate world and become a journalist and a podcaster, I had then discovered Bitcoin after a while. And when I started going to conferences, I had looked at the ecosystem that I'm seeing, like the tech ecosystem, because I come from that world, right? So looking at all the companies, looking at the technological solutions that are out there, the different types of products that companies are building. And I was quite shocked. I mean, I looked around and I was like, wow, this industry is so young. This is like only the beginning. And that's why when people say we're so early, for me, it has like another dimension. Like the industry is so early. Like there is so little money in this industry, fiat money, right? It's just the beginning of like thinking about all the different utilities, applications, technologies, different layers of services that can be built around this beautiful protocol that is Bitcoin. So there is so much to do in that industry. So I was hooked. I mean, I was hooked on Bitcoin because of what it is for me as an individual, because of the hedge and the protection that it gives me from the state. And I was looking for freedom, and I found it, financial freedom and sovereignty. I think I found it in Bitcoin. But then from a technological standpoint, and just looking at the evolution of money, the evolution of that technological sector, the finance sector, it's quite extraordinary, I think, to be where we're at in that industry today. I think that the Bitcoin community and ecosystem are leading something very unique in the world. And not many people are aware of that. Not many people pay attention, luckily or unfortunately for them, depending who you ask. But I think we are going to discover a lot more of that beauty that is called the Bitcoin protocol in the years to come.
Yeah, and you mentioned it was the freedom aspect that attracted to you to Bitcoin and protecting yourself from the state. Maybe if you want to expand on that a little bit, and what does that mean for you?
Sure. So during COVID years, starting 2020 and 2021, I consciously made a decision to be in a minority group and not participate in a medical experiment of big pharma and big tech and big government. And because of that, I felt how the government can really violate my human rights and try to coerce me to do something that I don't want to do, and discriminate me and my son in the country that I live in, that is supposed to be like the safest place for me in the world. And it was not. And I really felt how easy it is for the state to violate my human rights. And once that happened, it kind of woke me up. And I said, okay, if that's happening with my health or, my bodily autonomy, then the next thing the state's going to try and do is come for my property or my money if they need to. If what I'm seeing is what really is developing in the world, and we're going into some tough times with wars and conflicts, and the end of the fourth turning, which is always bringing it with it a lot of emergencies and crises and disasters and things like that, then why wouldn't the state decide that now they have to put their hands on what's mine? And I've been working very hard for that. And I'm a single mom. I have one son, and I am not planning once again to surrender to the state. So I was looking for ways to hedge what's mine. And as I was looking around and started to learn about fiat, and I was, the first thing I bumped into is gold. Okay, gold is like a safe haven. You can always put your trust in gold. For thousands of years, people have done that. It's always safe, and it's a precious metal that will help you go through some tough times. But as I continued to learn, okay, there is gold. It's physical. It has some shortcomings. And what can I do if I actually want to leave with what's mine? Gold is not so easy to serve me for that purpose. And so, at the same time, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but I kind of attracted good people to my space. And one of them was the head of the largest Bitcoin community and school in Israel. There is a media company called Crypto Jungle in Israel, and he's the CEO and the founder, and he kind of followed me during COVID. And I was doing a lot of journalistic and activist work during that time, reporting in English to the world, creating a lot of content, and kind of exposing the corruption of the government and the state to the world. And he came over and said, you've been doing really good work, and you kind of get it. You get like the government corruption and the state overreach and all of that. Now you just need to learn about Bitcoin. And I'm like, dude, I was waiting for someone to teach me. Can you teach me? And he's like, yes. And so he did. And he answered all my questions. He came with me to do my first transaction. He gave me a copy of the Bitcoin Standard, and off I went to my journey to start going down the rabbit hole. And ever since, I don't think I've stopped. It's been about 3 years now. And I'm loving this because as I was learning about Bitcoin, I started integrating that type of content into my podcast as well and into my content. And today my podcast, which is quite varied, it has different types of, like a big variety of topics that I cover. Bitcoin is one of them, and obviously financial sovereignty. So that's awesome because I really see, Bitcoin as a great way to, hedge yourself from the state and a potential for people to bring more honesty and integrity into their life. I know you've written a book about that, but I do see Bitcoin as an entity that is driving us to look at ourselves better and invites us to make some changes in our lives if we are open to it, because we have to unlearn a lot of the things we have learned, and we have to change paradigms and conceptions and beliefs when we start our journey into Bitcoin. And I've gone through a lot of that, and I still am. I'm a humble student, and I love what I'm going through.
That's beautifully said. Maybe what's something about you that you've noticed has really changed on this journey?
Oof, so much. Let me see. I mean, one of the things that you can actually see in the world around me is that I used to be, one of those people that was, I know a lot of your listeners are going to be on LinkedIn. I have close to 20,000 connections on LinkedIn. So I was highly regarded and very popular in the tech industry and in Israel in general, in the global tech industry as well. I used to be invited to all those conferences and meetups, and and I was a CMO of a company and making a lot of fiat and like really high wages, managing dozens and dozens of people, budgets in the millions, bringing a lot of revenue to the companies I was working for. And here I am today, kind of almost replaced all of my network of connections. I am not friends with the people that I used to be friends with anymore. So my social circles have changed greatly. And it's not just because of Bitcoin, but it's because of the changes that I've allowed myself to go through as part of the evolution that I went through. And I had discovered that a lot of what was filling my old life is really empty and meaningless, and doesn't really hold much substance, not the substance that I want to have in my life anymore. A lot of it is very superficial, and a lot of it is around, how much money you make and how important you are and how many people you manage and what kind of title you have and how many companies you've worked for and who you shook hands with. And I don't give a fuck about all these things anymore. So, the big change you can see if you look at my LinkedIn activity, for example, it's quite amazing that I still post on LinkedIn because I'm kind of sick of that platform. But if you look at my LinkedIn activity pre-2020, I would say pre-2023, you would find that every post I would put out there, I'd have like way above 50, 80, 100 likes and lots of engagement, like thousands of people like in terms of engagements and a lot of comments and stuff and all this, yay. But it's all very empty. And then today I post stuff. Most people that see, I know that they see my content. They don't understand what I put out there. And if they do understand, they're like, ooh, who is this? And why is she saying all those weird things about the state or the government or the global organizations or a fiat system? What is fiat at all? What is she talking about? Why is she talking about money all the time? So I think greatly my LinkedIn social circle, which is not really a social circle. It's just like a false construct that exists on a fake platform called LinkedIn. So I think that is, a great change from where I am today. And I don't really measure or judge my success in life or my satisfaction in life in terms of the number of likes or connections I have on social media platforms or even the amount of invitations I get to parties or things like that. Although I was invited to Michael Saylor's party.
You didn't get to go to you went to the Saylor party.
Yes. Anyway, you know how it is. One door closes, another opens. So it's just very different than what it used to be. I do have today more than 3.2 million views on my podcast since I started, which is a pretty good indication that I'm doing something right. But I guess the audience and the circles around me have changed greatly since I've started going through this evolution in consciousness, I would say.
Very cool. So we were saying earlier, you're now traveling around, you're speaking at Bitcoin events all over the world. And one of the subjects that you've been commonly speaking on has to do with the government's alternative is in the evolution of money and something called central bank digital currencies.
Yep. Yeah, that's a treat. So CBDCs, they're like the new frontier for central banks and states and traditional finance. Central banks digital currency, that's CBDCs, and they have two parts to it, wholesale and retail. On the wholesale front, the technology would cover mostly the exchange of money and transactions between banks, commercial banks, and also between the commercial banks and central banks, and also between nations. So between central banks around the world. That's the wholesale part. And then the retail part would take care of all transactions and exchanges and payments from the end user side in front of what's called a financial institution or a payment service provider. Depending on the country, they call it in different names. So it doesn't have to be the central bank itself. It could be the central bank issuing CBDCs, which are just like fiat. So in your country, they could be a Canadian dollar, a euro, a dollar, a shekel, wherever you are. It will be your local currency. So the central bank will issue that digital currency, will lend it out to the commercial bank, and the commercial bank will then lend it out to you as the end user. Or it doesn't have to be the commercial bank. It can be a supermarket. So it depends what kind, like in your country, what kind of architecture the CBDC would have. They would make sure that they would license the relevant payment service providers or financial institutions that under the law, they would be able to trade in CBDCs, and they will then be able to issue their own token and then, give it to the end consumer, and the end consumer will have a digital wallet and will have to manage their balances in that digital wallet. They will probably be limited in how much of that CBDC they can carry or hold. It could be bearing interest or not, depending on the country, again, in the architecture. It would have the potential to be switched on and off, that digital wallet that you have, by the central bank or the commercial bank or the financial institution. It will have the potential to have an expiry date on the money, just like a voucher or any kind of token or coupon. It can also have the potential of a geofencing, depending again on the implementation, but they could implement a geofence on where you use the money, and programmability, so they could program what you would use the money for or not. But all of those features that I've now mentioned, they're on the retail side. So the retail CBDC side, more than the wholesale. Other use cases used for CBDC could be cross-border transactions between people. They could be remittances. Yeah, they're mostly working on that for outside of the country, but locally in the country, it's mostly payments and deposits and things like that. So this is like a general overview of what is CBDC. In every country, it's a little bit different. More than 110 countries are experimenting with different stages of pilots of CBDCs around the world. But almost all countries are running some kind of experiment or pilot. Some are more advanced and some are less. They're all supposed to implement that probably by 2030 in alignment with the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations, because one of the goals, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations is around digitization. So they're digitizing the financial system, right? And in some countries, you see pushbacks about CBDCs, and the public seems to be a little bit more aware, especially for the retail side, and they voice their dissent for CBDCs. And because of that, politicians who are listening and do not want to handle any type of revolutions that they have not initiated, they are kind of taking a step back, saying, okay, we've listened to you. We're not going to issue that retail CBDC that we were planning on issuing or experimenting with. Instead of that, we're going to do something else, but don't worry, it's not going to be as draconian or dystopian as the retail CBDC, but we are doing something else. Normally, that something else is stablecoins. So expect to see a lot of activity around stablecoins in countries that said no to retail CBDCs. But in places like Israel, where I live, you see the Central Bank of Israel going ahead full speed with their plan for a retail and wholesale CBDC solution. And they're saying that their inspiration is the ECB, the EU's central bank, which is pushing forward quite hard on both retail and wholesale implementations of CBDCs. In fact, Christine Lagarde, the head of the ECB, has recently announced that in October 2025, they're going to launch the digital euro, which is the CBDC of Europe, if they manage to get approval from the relevant stakeholders, which is everyone except for the citizens of the EU. So EU Commission and the EU Parliament and the EU blah, blah, but it's everyone except for the citizens, right? Of course, clearly. So, and then they're going to have a timeline of about 2 years or so, 2.5 years, maybe even 3 years of like taking it down to market, roll it out, implement it, and start using it, which takes us pretty conveniently towards 2030, as we mentioned.
Yeah, lots to pull on there. I think as I'm listening to you talk, one of the common things, I feel like people are in some ways at least vaguely aware of the concept of digital currencies, central bank digital currencies, because there has been various sort of marketing efforts. And as you mentioned, in Canada and in the United States, some politicians have opposed the traditional retail route. I think you mentioned Christine Lagarde. There's this common sort of misrepresentation that our money's kind of basically digital already, and this is some sort of a quality of life improvement for money users, and this is being done for our benefit. Maybe I'd love to come back to Europe in greater detail, but let's start with China, where there has already been the digital yuan was rolled out, and how has that been, and how has the experience been in China, and what have they been actually doing?
Right. So in China was actually the first country to roll out a CBDC solution. They still call it pilot in China, but really it's already a rollout. It's not a pilot anymore. And it started quite lame. Like it wasn't really taking off, and they tried different tactics to get the public to adopt it. They airdropped free money and, put free money in your digital wallet just so you can take it. So most people took it and pulled cash out with it, and because they could, and kind of that was the end of that trial. And so they tried different things to get the public to adopt it. It's called the ECNY, the digital yuan. They weren't very successful. And then what they did, and obviously their biggest competition in China was in-house, was local. It was Alipay and WeChat Pay, which are the two most common payment apps in China. Most Chinese use them in order to pay daily, digitally, for years and years. It's not new. And so I think that at one stage when the Central Bank of China or China have understood that they're not going to beat them, they may join them. And that's what they've done. They kind of instructed Alibaba, which is the owner of Alipay, and WeChat, I don't remember the name of the company that owns WeChat, but they basically told them, now you need to integrate ECNY technologically into your platforms. So today you can continue using your Alipay and WeChat Pay if you're in China, if you're Chinese, but use the source of your money as the ECNY in the app. So, they went behind the scenes, and basically that's the tactic that most central banks that I've been reading their white papers or looking at their documentation have been mentioning as, we don't want to interrupt your current way of living. Like, we know you're already used to certain payments of methods, certain methods of payment. We don't want to take that away from you. You're using your wearables, you're using your Google Pay or Apple Pay, your credit cards. We want you to keep using what you're using. If we need to, we'll integrate on the back end, right? In Israel, they said the same. So that's very similar to the strategy of China. One of the funny things, because you started with the digital euro and then we talked about China, I want to draw a connection there between the two. So in the last report that I've read about the digital euro, it said that Europeans have, so one step back. So in Europe, they have done a survey for 19,000 Europeans across 11 Eurozone countries. And in that survey, they found that most of the public in the EU is actually not interested in the digital euro or in CBDC, any type of CBDC solution. And so one of the findings in that report is that Europeans have a strong preference for existing payment methods and see no need or no real benefit in a new type of payment system, just like we said. So while this looks like a positive pushback, right? They're saying we don't want this, we don't need this. This can actually serve as a precursor to a tactic of the technological integration that I had mentioned. Like in China, if you can't beat them, join them, right? So similarly to how they have operated in China with the retail CBDC, the ECB can actually embed the digital euro into existing apps that exist today in Europe. Or they can come up with their own app and say, we're trialing it out. We have to do it. So in China, for example, now they are enjoying 180 million personal wallet users and $1 trillion a day of transaction. Yeah. So, and that's not because people love ECNY. As we said, they don't need it, but it's just now integrated behind the scenes. So I think the Europeans are kind of watching what China is doing and how how Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum said China is the blueprint, right? We're looking at how China is doing things and we're learning from them in the Western world. As much as we think that we are more advanced and modern, we're going in that trajectory. And and it's quite interesting to see the kind of choices that Western democracies are doing. Instead of, staying kind of free and liberal and allowing people to manage things the way they want to, they go down the China trajectory.
Yeah. Is it Jack Ma from Alibaba? And he went missing and...
Ooh, yes. And I have spoken to Roger Huang. Roger Huang is...
Our very own Roger Huang.
Yeah, Roger, Canadian, right? So Roger is a Canadian Chinese, right? He writes a lot about China. And I've interviewed him for my podcast and we talked about that and the fact that, if you don't comply, you may disappear for a while and then show up again after a few weeks. And the company have all of a sudden decided to take that direction that the state had wanted it to take, hush, hush. And you're not supposed to talk about it too much. So yeah, that has happened, for example.
Okay, so let's come back to Europe. And there's a few interesting things that have been said about this preparation for launch in October. One of them is the possibility of the European Bank being able to turn people's savings into a way to...
Right. Did you see that? How did she say? She said, we are setting up what's called the Savings and Investments Union, and it aims to redirect 10 trillion euros in private savings to fund military expansion.
It reminds me of during COVID, and the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada made a few different statements about trying to figure out a way to unlock people's savings as a method to drive the economy forward and or access people's savings. It's like, it's yeah.
Dude, what the flip? Yeah, so they did say it. Van der Leyen, who is the head of the EU, what is she? The president of the EU or whatever?
I think so, yeah.
Unelected kind of president of the EU. She had announced the Rearm Europe plan, which requires 800 billion euros. Where are those 800 billion going to come from? Are we starting to roll the printers? And so, yeah, big print is probably coming, and in a nice synchronization with the digital euro, it's coming out in a similar time. I don't want to believe, and I want to be wrong that these things are related and they're actually going to go hardcore, fascist and really confiscate people's money and put that into a digital CBDC, retail CBDC wallet. I really don't want to believe that. But they're making all the noises to make us believe that that's the direction they're going in. So I really hope they fail. By the way, you know how much the project costs, the CBDC project in Europe? It's estimated at 430 million euros for infrastructure and operations over 10 to 15 years, excluding internal ledger development costs.
Oh, wow. Maybe the people at Ripple are handling that for them.
And you know what? You don't need to worry. If you're European, you don't need to worry about this cost because the ECB intends to fund this through seigniorage income like they do with printing money. So, they will make money out of them printing this digitally.
It's an interesting point to make too, I think, around this 10 to 15 year timeline, because states and government bodies don't need to think or act on the same time horizon as individual people do. And just because they can't execute something successfully over 2 years doesn't necessarily mean they've been stymied, right? This is just something that...
And you know what, Scott? Exactly. That's the point that I always tell people when they... when we debate CBDCs, and I have people who tell me it's never going to work and it's never going to happen. I tell them you underestimate low time preference of governments and global institutions. Their plans, they go way back. Agenda 2030 is just a reincarnation of Agenda 21 that was born, I don't know how many, 30, 40, 50 years ago. This is old shit. And they have the leeway and the vision and the time and the, printer to do all that stuff and to kind of hand over and roll over the information from one clerk to the next over decades. Because they have time and money and they're the rulers, right? They see themselves as the masters of this thing. So, we underestimate. Well, they're not, their government. When was the last time? I mean, I had this debate with Samson Mao, and I love having these debates. When was the last time that you saw that a government was successful in rolling out good technology? You saw how failing they were during COVID. Yes and no, because yes, they may have failed in some things during COVID, but they succeeded big time in getting the society to be compliant and subjected to harsher kind of regulations. Now they accept different things that they haven't accepted before. So the Overton window that was opened in COVID didn't close. It was successful in a way. So maybe the technological solution of, a QR code to show your vaccine passport, maybe that wasn't specifically successful in a specific country. But overall, I think COVID was quite a successful experiment around the world. And if they failed at something, don't worry. Bill Gates has a lot more up his sleeve.
Yeah, he was just last week quoted as saying that we're in a very short time going to need a lot fewer people, and that AI will replace most people's ability to do meaningful work by the end of the decade. So, yeah.
I agree with you 100% that they have a very, low time preference and long-term vision. They can try again and again, even if they fail. Like China doesn't give a fuck if they fail short term.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially China. And it's a pet topic of mine because I lived in China and I love talking about the experience. China is a very unique place in the world in that for many reasons, but partly because it's a continuous, 4,000 year civilization that has had a lot of internal war, but, China was never bombed heavily, like Europe was. So they have a different sort of a control mechanism that has evolved over a very long period of time, and they have no intention of going anywhere. Like when you're in China, they are used to being one of the dominant countries in the world, and they have been for most of the time of their existence. And the sort of the general view on the ground is that there was a blip there for 50 years when things got kind of chaotic and disorganized, but that they've just been sort of taking the time since to reorganize themselves and prepare for another sort of golden age.
Tencent is the name of the company that owns WeChat.
Yeah, okay. Maybe let's niddle into a few more of the specifics around what people could expect and some of the more concerning aspects of how these things work. So some of these things have been piloted. We were talking about China, Thailand. So we're thinking about Europe, and you mentioned some of these things sort of at a high level, like geofencing or different types of interest rates. But to speak in specifics, what would be the really concerning implementation tech aspects of different CBDC projects?
So I think the most obvious one is privacy, like the fact that whatever you do is going to be seen and monitored by banks or financial institutions or payment service providers. And it's not like what you do today on the fiat system is not being seen and monitored, but here they have more draconian capabilities of switching on and off. And it's not like today when your money is being confiscated or your bank account is being closed, at least there is some delay. Maybe you can pull your money out. This is all digital. This is all smart contracts. Like, if he did that, then switch off the wallet, So it's like, dang, you crossed the road, or I don't know what you've done that is wrong. You bought alcohol and then you went into your car, and they have the capability of knowing that it's off. So, this is like, we can come up with so many examples of how programming your money or switching on and off is a threat for your privacy and your freedom. And then the next thing that is in danger when you think about retail CBDC is the ability to set for you not only what you're going to do with your money, but where can you use it and when can you use it. So let's say in Thailand, for example, in one of their fucking weird draconian pilots, they actually said that the money that they're giving people in that pilot can only be used to purchase some things, but not others. Like you cannot purchase alcohol or tobacco, or you can only purchase like clothes or books or whatever. So just in the same way they did it there, they can do it with any type of, whatever they deem as good and right and whatever they deem as wrong and bad. So, that capability is really freaky. And then you have the where you can use it. So one of their pilots said they can only use the money 4 kilometers radius around their house. And the excuse was, we're going to stimulate the local economy in a neighborhood, right? Yeah, sounds great. What a great excuse. But what if I want to use my money wherever I want to use it. Like, fuck you. I want to use it wherever I want to use it. So they can tell you where to use it with a geofence. And that's pretty freaky. And then the expiry is also pretty annoying, because what if I want to save? This is teaching people to spend and stimulate this Keynesian economy that just has to grow because it's a debt-based economy. And if we don't spend what's ours today and buy more and get more debt, then we're not going to help the fiat beast grow. And they want to feed the beast through us. So that is kind of freaky. Now, can I say something specifically about Thailand, since we've mentioned it? So Thailand went really extreme with the types of pilots that it created. At first, it did the pilot just a really small scale. I think it was 10,000 people with all those things that I said. And then they wanted to grow this pilot and extend it to 50 million people, and with similar restrictions like geofencing and everything, and expiry date. And I think they got a lot of pushback, and maybe even their technological solutions are not ready. I don't know, but they did get a lot of pushback also from people like me that were, at that year I was like circulating around the world, telling about the Thailand use case everywhere I could. And those clips became viral. So many people saw what Thailand is planning. And then as I'm following, this is my weird new habit of following governors of central banks and reading their white papers and listening to them speaking at financial conferences. I actually heard the governor of the Central Bank of Thailand in a conference in Singapore in November 2024, sitting on stage on a fireside chat, telling the guy that's interviewing him, yeah, so about the retail CBDC, we were experimenting with it and we were trying, but to be honest, we don't really see the justification to come out with it because the payment methods that we have right now are pretty good. And plus there is this, pushback on privacy and whatnot from the public, and, kind of said it in the brackets and then moved on very quickly. And so we decided to shelve it. So we're not doing that. We're not going ahead with the retail CBDC, but we are going full steam ahead with the wholesale CBDC part. So, and then he expanded on what they're going to do with wholesale, like the cross-border and remittances and things like that. And they are piloting with stablecoins as well. And they are also piloting with KYC Bitcoin in Phuket. So they've decided to take Phuket as a pilot island, and they're starting I think it's a government app where even tourists will be able to use it. When you get to Phuket, you'll be able to download it and use Bitcoin as you are after you have KYC'd yourself to the state. So they know who you are and that you're using Bitcoin there. But I guess that pushback is a positive thing because it made them roll it back, like the plan for that CBDC. And obviously Bitcoin is a better solution than CBDC. Now, KYC, again, is going to be very much looked at by the state. So they're going to be monitoring that too. And we know that solutions like that exist today to monitor the blockchain and to help the state take down certain people or accounts if they, violated AML, anti-money laundering laws, etc. So that is happening, but it's going to be much harder, I think, than with retail CBDC. So I guess it's not as bad. But again, I think retail CBDC is again an Overton window that is open to the extreme, and then they take it back a bit when they understand that you push back and people understand and they listen and they follow. Okay, we're going to go with stablecoin, just a small, cute, national, regulated, highly regulated stablecoin, or KYC Bitcoin, or blah, blah, blah. Like they're experimenting with different things. So it's an Overton window still. And we are, whether we like it or not, in my opinion, we are transitioning into a new era of a digital global money.
Yeah, I mean, and we are also, seeing sort of a global experiment in the fusion of government and banking. I think, we had Rishi Sunak and in Canada, we currently have an unelected prime minister. His last job was the governor of the Bank of England. So, there's lots of different things to follow.
Are we talking about Carney?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a special one.
Oh, yeah.
Another unelected one, right?
Another unelected one, yeah.
It seems to be a trend these days. So many unelected officials. It's amazing. And we all live in democracies, right? Wow.
Yeah, there's lots of rules to be circumvented. This does all come around.
If people have not yet woken up from the illusion of democracy, like wakey.
Maybe just as like a final to sort of put a bow on this, in your own mind, we started with Bitcoin. You've gone down the CBDC rabbit hole. And even for our listeners who've been following along, it might not be super obvious as to how Bitcoin presents a solution to a number of these more concerning aspects of a CBDC future. So if you could just sort of like boil it down to, how do you present Bitcoin to people as, what are the things? We talked about, they've acknowledged that we're not going to be able to save in fiat currency as they continue to devalue it. So there's an obvious example.
So that's an obvious one for sure. The fact that it cannot be debased, and we will see our Bitcoin demonetizing most of the monetary assets around the world and being appreciated with time versus fiat. But then I think one of my favorite aspects of Bitcoin is permissionless, is the fact that I mean, that's the first reason why I went into Bitcoin, because I was looking to move my assets, my wealth from a place where it's not safe. In my opinion, it's not safe, to a place where I don't need to ask permission from anyone to use what's mine, and it's mine. I mean, I know that banks make it theirs. Most people think it's still theirs if it's in the bank, but if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's theirs. You have an IOU with the bank, but they own your money and it's no longer yours. And in order to get access to what's yours, you need to ask for permission. And in Bitcoin, you don't. You can access what's yours. If it's in self-custody, if you hold it in your custody and you don't hold it in some exchange where, again, if something happens, you don't have access to it, or you need to ask some technical support rep to give you access to your money in some kind of wallet on Coinbase or wherever you hold your Bitcoin, it's yours. You can use it whatever you decide, even if it's KYC. Okay, let them know that you have now transferred this money from this wallet to that wallet. As long as you didn't commit any crime and you didn't, you weren't part of any AML activity, then you are the master of what's yours and you can do what you want with your money. Now, you can also enjoy the benefit of moving to countries that don't have capital gains tax over that money, which is funny that they still tax money, right? I mean, it's not funny that they tax, that's what they do, but we would be surprised if there was no capital gain tax everywhere to begin with, but it's going to take some time. I'm sure we are going to see more and more of that trend trickling down around the world as nations start to compete with each other over people's wealth, because their economical situation is so dire because of fiat. They would just have to start fighting at one stage over attracting wealth and attracting people to them. And they will start dropping or at least reducing capital gains tax, as we're seeing that is happening already in places like Czech Republic, Portugal, Spain, where else? Germany, right? After a certain period of time. Where else? Obviously, El Salvador. So you have a few countries already around the world that are starting to understand that people who hold Bitcoin are not criminals, that they have power, they have wealth, that they need to start serving them. And I love the example that Michael Saylor gave in the podcast that I interviewed him, where, he says, you have this amount of money and in Bitcoin, and you hold it in New York, and the state of New York decides that it puts all these restrictions and regulations over Bitcoin and you go, okay, no problem. I'll move my money to Wyoming. Wyoming starts doing, okay, I'll move my money to Florida. I'll move my money to Singapore. Like I can move it wherever I want because I am the master. I decide. I'm not in the mercy anymore of any other financial institution to decide for me what I do with my wealth. So that is a paradigm change. The power center is changing from, the ones with the hand on the printer and with the decree to the actual people or the institutions that are holding this asset. And that's a game changer. That has probably never happened before. Not like that anyway. So I love the permissionless aspect of it.
Very cool.
I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for.
No, that's a great answer. Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah. And Efrat, we're sort of running out of time. I want to thank again for coming on. It's great to have you sharing your insights and discussing this is like honestly such an important topic that most people just don't have the time or the bandwidth to digest and properly comprehend. So
I understand them. It's not a fun topic to watch. They can find in my blog a lot of information and videos about it.
So we'll have some links to that stuff in the show notes. But is there anywhere in particular you want to point listeners if they want to learn more?
Yeah, there'll be one link that I'll put in the show notes, and that has everything. So my blog, my Twitter, which I'm the most active at on my blog and my Twitter, and my podcast. So anywhere you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And if you're listening and you made it all the way to the end of the episode, I want to thank as well for tuning in, and we hope to see you again next week. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Block Reward. We're trying to do something different here, creating accessible conversations meant for people who aren't obsessed with Bitcoin. If you found this episode informative and engaging, hit that subscribe button to make sure you stay updated with future episodes. Your feedback matters. We'd greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to share your reviews and help us with our goal of creating Bitcoin content that is simple and easy to understand. Bitcoin has an important role to play in the future of finance. It will change the way we save, spend, and invest. Discover why Bitcoin offers a game-changing opportunity for forward-thinking employers by visiting blockrewards.ca. Block Rewards' mission is helping Canadian employers implement strategies for integrating Bitcoin into compensation and benefits, supercharge your recruitment and retention strategies, and help your team members plan for the rising cost of living by rewarding their work with the hardest money ever invented. Special thanks to our top sponsor, Paramount Employee Benefits Consulting, Canada's only Bitcoin forward benefits and pension advisory. For more information, find them at paramountbenefits.ca. Big shout out to Podigy, our production team that makes all this possible, and BMX Escape for producing our music. Bitcoin is an expansive and dense topic many people walk away from early. To Bitcoin enthusiasts looking for that podcast they can share with friends, family, and colleagues, one they'll actually listen to, we hope that is us. The content of these conversations is meant to be provided for information purposes only. Nothing here is investment advice. Bitcoin is a big topic. Be sure to do your own research before making any personal financial decisions. Thanks for listening.